A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, and Z. Now that I know my ABCs, next time won't you sing with me? I learned the alphabet when my dad and mom would drive and point to something and ask for the first letter of the item. They would point to, for instance, McDonald's and then have us say M. They also had cards to practice. A for apple, B for bat. My mom would sing the alphabet often, and I had a wooden sign on my door to help me learn and recognize my name. My parents, most often my mom, would read to me at this age as my dad worked nights. My mom read a lot of Dr. Seuss books and fairy tales almost every night, my favorite being Daisy Head Maisie, which is about a little girl who grew a daisy out of her head and all the problems that accompany her with this small flower. I also really enjoyed A Million Cats, which is about a man who goes out on the search for a cat for his old wife. He finds one and then another and another until he is roughly at 1,000,000,000. And when he returns, his wife only says that we can have one. He asks the cats, the prettiest one can stay, and they all begin to fight until only one remains. This book my mom read a lot, and we began to fall apart mainly because of how I really wanted a cat, but my dad was allergic. I also practiced writing and drawing on my board, which had a pen and tab to instantly erase and practice again. I would attend Gingerbread Cottage preschool for 2 years, where I would continue practicing writing and reading in more traditional teacher-centered activities, where it was a lot of tracing letters and worksheets, as this is all I remember in my beginning schooling. When I turned 6, my dad would begin reading the Harry Potter books to me, but I would fall asleep after the first few pages. I would go to Longin Elementary School. It was clear that something was going on with me, as reading and writing were very hard. I was writing letters backwards. My mom says that her worst experience of helping me learn to read was one night when I was looking up at the stars and wished I could read. As my sister often had an easier time in school than I did and often excelled at SOL tests, she even made a comment once asking me why I didn't receive advanced marks like she did. However, after a lot of testing and being taken out of the classroom, it was discovered I had dyslexia. I was put into smaller classes during English time where we would practice reading and writing based on our needs. This would be a tier 3 in the RTI approach. I feel very lucky that my school didn't find my problem in the 4th grade like many others, as the IQ approach mainly is based on IQ. Miss Pepper was the teacher who truly helped me to learn to read. I would be taught by her throughout my entire elementary school years, and she remained open to help me after class. My dad's favorite memory, and one of mine, was with my entire family, where we would go to Harry Potter parties at midnight to get the new book, which was at Borders, which is now closed in Richmond and is now Phoenix University. Stephanie would later lose interest, but my dad and I went each time. At the party, they had people reading the previous books, face paint, and of course beans of terrible flavors. Grass, mint, puke, cherry, yuck. From memory, I remember to write my worksheets and reading textbooks by a game of popcorn reading, which I now know is a bad way of teaching. We also did journals, which I liked a lot, as it was personal, and at the age we are quite egocentric. However, I didn't like presenting to the entire class. One of my classroom teachers gave us a booklet, and we would write words we didn't know and go up to her to get help along with spelling tests, which had a lot of homework that I didn't like, especially on the days we had to write in rainbow colors, where one color was red, the next was blue, green, etc. In pyramids where you would start with the first letter, second letter, third letter, and so on. In elementary school, I read a lot of Junie B. Jones and Magic Treehouse books. My favorite, though, was a book called Sideways Stories from Wayside School. I really liked to introduce this book to my class as it was fun and dramatic and had all of us at the edge of our seats. I even got my own copy at the end of the year. Many of my teachers gave out prizes when we did well. I usually picked out journals from the box. I would then go to Hunger Creek Middle School from 6th to 7th grade, where we would receive Apple laptops. I would have one of my favorite reading teachers, Mrs. Scott. She had a reading area with couches and would pass these squishy balls to us when we answered questions. She would assign us parts and we got to act out in our reading. I was the grandma in one book. She would also have us look at the chapter titles after each and have us rename them, which would help us understand the main point of each chapter. Right before winter break, she even had a Polar Express party, as we had read that book earlier and watched the movie with hot chocolate. I still continued to struggle with grammar and needed to practice and review the different syntax rules, as the way I was taught it was put into short-term memory. We began to write less essays by paper and more on our laptops. I would take a class in 7th grade that would teach me how to properly type, which was annoying as we were to cover the keys with this orange pad so we couldn't see. But after the end of the class, it really raised my confidence as I could look at the screen and not look at the letters. My mom would move my sister and I to her hometown in Roanoke, where we would attend Woodrow Wilson Middle School, which was of a lower economic status, which obviously meant no more laptops. The school system would also switch from a 7-point scale to a 10-point, which really made me happy as it was now easier to pass classes. My best friend Marielle would later give me a book that she didn't want to read, Twilight, by Stephanie Meyer, which would really get me into the reading bug. As I had now found a genre which interested me, this would probably be my favorite reading memory. From there on, I began to like reading, and I would then begin to read the Harry Potter books, and so on. It was also really cool to see the movie adaptations of each and compare, and yes, the books are indeed usually better. I would go to Patrick Henry High School up until winter break and move in with my dad. I still had my IEP, individualized education plan, but it was beginning to be just being taken out of the class for a quieter room to take a test. I also got a Dell computer as I was back in the Glen Allen district. I do feel like my reading needs were met as I was getting good at reading comprehension and decoding text, though I still needed more grammar help as essays were bleeding red. It wasn't the best practice for me as I would just throw it at the back of my binder and move on, never learning from it, and then would finish with a worksheet where we could use our notes. I could also have used more help with learning to cite correctly with MLA and APA styles. My final year of high school, Mr. Meister was a really good teacher. He taught us a great deal of what we would need to succeed in college and had us do video projects and taught us ethos, pathos, and logos, which we are now discussing in English for 100. According to the Reading Maturity Survey, I have a great interest in reading, but I need to focus on reading with a purpose, not just for entertainment. I also need to focus on practicing my grammar and vocabulary and for more challenging material. The courses that were helpful in terms of reading and writing were Education 310, Creative Writing, and Grammar Theory. Creative writing was challenging. We got to write what we wanted with very little direction from the professor. Our work was also highly criticized for over an hour, which helped me as I usually receive didn't receive that much critique from other assignments. It was also challenging to read others' work, as I had to decode and help fix their errors like they did for me. I really like reading, and my favorite memories are from elementary and middle school, when I received the book Twilight, which sparked my interest in reading, as well as Harry Potter, as it was something my dad and I did together, along with the teachings of Miss Scott and Miss Pepper, who taught me based on my individual needs and not from a textbook. I still like reading, but my life is busier, and I read mainly during winter and summer breaks. During this winter break, I read The Darkest Corner and Bad Girls Don't Die. My worst writing experience was receiving the dripping red ink papers that we never looked over with our teacher, so they just sat in the back of a notebook till they got thrown away, that we spent hours on. I still need a lot of help with grammar, as my needs weren't met, but they have gotten better thanks to grammar theory. I really want to make writing fun for my future students. I want to teach them through art and games. I want to be that teacher, like Miss Pepper, for my students. Without her, I don't know where I would be today. I feel that I will look back at past assignments with my students and have conferences to discuss their writing and how they can do better. My students will not be sitting on for hours on end, but be moving and singing their ABCs. I would like to give my kids surveys to see what their reading interests are. I would also like to provide them with real, authentic experiences that give them the opportunity to help their community by writing to their principal, local government, or news articles.